Is it true that that humans have already discovered a method of destroying humanity?
Well, I suppose that really has always been true. You could always beat everybody to death. You mean to do it by inadvertence?
Yes.
Not quite. Not quite. You can certainly destroy enough of humanity so that only the greatest act of faith can persuade you that what's left will be human. This is a matter on which much more should be known. There's every reason for us to say what we know, and above all to say what we don't know. The genetic problems, the problems of what might happen in the future to the human species as a result of having radioactivity in the body or having radiation outside. The geneticists don't know enough to be sure of that. We do know what happens if you're near an explosion, a bomb explosion. We know it from experience and from common sense. The things we know ought to be in the public domain, so people are fearful only in the measure in which fear is justified and rational. The things that aren't known should be talked about, because one of the ways to get things found out is to have it clear that we don't know the answers, and also one of the ways to give people the kind of responsibility and humanity which we would like to think we have is that they recognize when they don't know something and take their very ignorance into account in their planning. This is too long an answer to your question, but I feel very...
It certainly is not, and it brings me to another one that I wanted to ask very much, and that is that in this era that is more threatened and dominated than any previous one by scientists, their decisions, their discoveries, what about the poor, uninformed civilian?
It isn't the layman that's ignorant. It's everybody that's ignorant. The scientist may know a little patch of something. And if he's a humane and intelligent and curious guy, he'll know a few spots from other people's work. He may even be able to read a book. But his condition is the condition of everyone, which is that almost everything that's known to man, he doesn't know anything about at all, or knows it only in a very sketchy way. And that's because it's gotten a bit complicated. The problem of a coherent civilization is the problem of living with ignorance and not being frustrated by it. So that you find occasionally a man knows two things, and that intersection may be a great event in the history of ideas. Occasionally a man may think that something is relevant or exciting which no one before thought concerned him professionally. That may change the history of the world. And these are the connections, these virtual connections, these casual and occasional connections, which make the only kind of coherence we have. That and affection, that and respect, that and I suppose a kind of humanity. Now, if you look at the problem of science and government, then of course mostly it's not really science, it's pretty much practical application, because no one in the government of the United States needs to worry about whether the isotopic spin or the Strange's number are the real invariants of the subatomic work. They need to know sometimes things that are very hard to answer. Can a ballistic rocket enter the Earth's atmosphere if it's come a few thousand miles and have a skin that isn't burned up and so on? They need to know, is there any limit to the size of explosions you can make? They need to know all kinds of technical things. And these are not, in the narrow sense, the frontier of science, but they're technical and complicated. Some will understand one another in one area, some in another, and you get a kind of lacework of coherence. And that requires, I used the word affection before. For the government, it might be better to say trust, though I think even for the government, affection wouldn't be a hopeless word. Take in the government itself, which consists of laymen. Take the president or his secretary of state or his secretary of defense. All he can do is be sure that in one way or another, the advice he's being given is subject to criticism. So that if he gets a statement of how it is, this will cost so many dollars and take so many years, this is impossible. That anyone who has a different view and the professional qualifications that make it interesting can get to it. And I think that isn't too bad in the parts of the government I've been close to, that is the atom and the military establishment and the State Department. I think people have been able to tell their stories, and that folly has been corrected. But if you mean the people outside the government,
Yes.
and I think that's more important. There's a point that I feel most deeply, and I think I speak really now the voice of my profession, and that is the integrity of communication. The trouble with secrecy isn't that it inhibits science. It could, but in this country it's hardly been used that way. Technical things are really quite widely known, and those at the growing tip of any science are so far from practice that the people talk quite freely about them and should. The trouble with secrecy isn't that it doesn't give the public a sense of participation. The trouble with secrecy is that it denies to the government itself the wisdom and the resources of the whole community, of the whole country. And the only way you can do this, to let almost anyone say what he thinks, to try to give the best synopses, the best popularizations, the best mediations of technical things that you can, and to let men deny what they think is false, argue what they think is false. You have to have a free and uncorrupted communication. And this is so the heart of living in a complicated technological world. It is so the heart of freedom that is why we are all the time saying, does this really have to be secret? Couldn't you say more about that? Are we really acting in a wise way? Not because we enjoy chattering, not because we're not aware of the dangers of the world we live in, but because these dangers cannot be met in any other way.
Well, if I may say so, I think you were speaking there not only for your profession, but for mine, if it is a profession.
I'm sure of that.
There aren't, in fact, very many secrets.
There aren't secrets about the world of nature. There are secrets about the thoughts and intentions of men. Sometimes they're secret because a man doesn't like to know what he's up to if he can avoid it.
Dr. Oppenheimer, if enough nations get messing about with hydrogen bombs, is there any danger of contaminating the atmosphere, of the fallout being so heavy that we may damage ourselves without meaning to?
I'm not unworried about it. I tend still to worry about war rather than peace.